Hello, and welcome to this presentation on understanding the adolescent brain and the impact on teen mental health during the COVID-19 lockdown. I'm Dr. Clemmy Walker. I'm a clinical psychologist at the NHS Grampian and CAMHS Early Intervention Service. So why are we looking at this topic? Well, it's because everyone's recognising that COVID is having a massive impact on everyone's well-being at the moment. And within CAMHS, it is the children and adolescents that we see who are struggling particularly with these difficulties. We are hearing from families, from young people themselves, that they are finding it harder to manage more anxieties and worries, that they're having big feelings that they're not quite sure what to do with, and there's been lots of experience of sadness and loss for various reasons due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In this presentation, we hope to help you understand a bit more about the amazing teen brain and the changes that go on during this particular period of adolescent brain development, to provide a bit of context and background as to why teens might be feeling more sad, angry, worried, withdrawn than usual, why they might be behaving in ways that aren't their usual self, and what might be helpful in these challenging times. So we're just going to have a look at a video here to help us understand a wee bit more about adolescent brain development. Okay.
The adolescent period is absolutely amazing. People often give it a negative approach, saying, oh, it's a time where adolescents are going to lose their mind, or they're just immature, or raging hormones drive them crazy. These are all not only wrong, but they're myths that mislead us and actually disempower us. Whether we're adults or adolescents, they actually give us the wrong message, and they make it so there's nothing we can do. So what is actually the truth? The truth is that instead of raging hormones, what's happening is we have remodeling in the brain. In ways we never could have predicted, we now understand two big things are happening in the brain. Things you as an adult can support adolescents in developing well, and if you're an adolescent, you actually can use this to help your brain grow in an optimal way. What are those two things? The brain is pruning itself. So imagine that in childhood, you're growing like a tree and establishing all these branches and all these leaves are growing. In the brain, that means connections among the basic cell, the neuron, called synapses, are being established, and you're soaking in the knowledge of the world, and that's beautiful. The tree is just growing, growing, growing. But then what happens, that surprised everyone, is the brain begins to prune itself. You start carving away some of those leaves, some of the smaller branches, even some of the larger branches. And the reason for the pruning is to specialize the brain. While the child is developing in ways that are really generalized, learning everything they can about everything they can, an adolescent is going to begin to find their passion, to actually find things they like, things they really love doing, and to drive their development in that way. So pruning is actually a use it or lose it principle underneath it. That if you don't use something, you're going to lose it. So if you like sports or like dancing or like music, do those things so you continue to establish those circuits. The second thing that happens in the remodeling adolescent brain is myelin formation. Myelin is a healthy sheath that allows connected neurons to communicate with each other in a much more effective way. How? It's 100 times faster, the signal that's sent down a neuron to communicate with another neuron, 100 times faster, and after it fires off, it's 30 times shorter the resting period that happens. 30 times 100 is 3,000. So when you've put down myelin, you've made your neurons communicate 3,000 times more effectively. That's a great thing. Now, the great thing, too, is that you as an adolescent can actually use the focus of your attention to be aware of your emotions, aware of other people, to be engaging in activities, to be doing things with your thoughts that actually reinforce the parts of your brain you want to hold on to. So the good news about the remodeling story is that a field called neuroplasticity, how the brain responds to experience, shows us that what you do with your mind can change the activity and therefore the structure of your brain. So if you then come up with the statement that the ultimate goal of brain remodeling is to make an integrated brain, to differentiate areas, that's the pruning, and myelinate them. That's the linkage. When you increase differentiation and linkage, you make the brain more integrated. And an integrated brain is the pathway toward well-being. And you can do mind-sight exercises. These are exercises that increase insight, empathy, and integration. And if you do them as an adolescent, and you can also do them as an adult, you'll actually increase the integration of your brain as your brain is growing, not just during adolescence, but throughout the lifespan. And what's the outcome of integration? When integration is made visible, it's kindness and compassion. And so what we see through adolescent development is that our relationships become built on connections that are deep and filled with honoring each other's vulnerability, that's kindness, and supporting connections that are compassionate, filled with a sense of caring about other people and wanting to help them. This is the kind of world we can build as we move through life and support each other in our development.
Okay. So take 5 minutes and just have a think about, the things that your teen is interested in or that they were interested in prior to lockdown, the things that your teen enjoyed and that they regularly did or that they're still managing to keep going with. Think about the ways that your teen connects with others or that they were connecting with others prior to lockdown. Are they the kind of kid that like to meet up with their friends, in groups, out and about? Did they typically just see their friends in the school environment? Did they enjoy having their friends for sleepovers, catching up with them at their extracurricular clubs? Was it all about, catching up online? And have a wee think about how COVID and lockdown have created barriers to these or changed the way that these have to be done. Have classes been stopped? Well, we know no young people are getting to school at the moment, apart from a very small section where there's been provision made. Is there just less money to spend on activities and things that you otherwise would have been doing? Has transport been affected? How else has your young person been affected in terms of their opportunities for connecting and following their interests because of the pandemic? Feel free to pause the presentation here just to jot down a few notes or think about that with somebody at home. Okay, so at this stage in the life cycle, the adolescent brain is doing other interesting things as well. So we're just going to take 5 minutes to find out a little bit more about that also.
It's not easy being a teenager. There's the angst, the emotions, the raging hormones. And although hormones do play a big role in puberty, the brain is going through a lot of changes too. Neuroscientists are learning that some of the most puzzling teenage behavior may actually have some real benefits. Legally, you're considered an adult when you turn 18. But from the neuroscience perspective, your brain is really still developing.
And the current literature suggests that it's about around age 25 or so is when the brain finishes the period of adolescence.
This is Dr. Adriana Galvin, and she runs the Developmental Neuroscience Lab at UCLA. The brain develops from the back to the front, so the prefrontal cortex is the last region to fully develop.
The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain you need to make good decisions, to think about the future, think about consequences.
You can kind of think of it like the Spock of the brain, logical, calm, and collected. And then deeper in the brain, there are these emotional systems like the Limbic System that are more interested in immediate gratification. They're sort of like Captain Kirk, a risk taker, and a bit emotional. During the teenage years, the limbic system develops really quickly, and the prefrontal cortex is trying to catch up. Eventually, as individuals become adults, the prefrontal cortex will increasingly have more influence over behavior than the impulsive part of the brain. So, without a fully developed prefrontal cortex, you can kind of see why teens might be more impulsive or just worry less about future consequences. Another brain region that's really active during adolescence is this thing called the striatum, and it's a key part of the brain's reward system. Let's say you find 20 bucks on the street, or someone gives you a cookie. The striatum goes off, and it releases dopamine into the brain. Adriana's lab discovered that the teenage brain is super sensitive to different rewards like sugar and money, way more than in the brains of adults and children. And all this activity in the brain's reward center, it may actually serve a purpose.
We asked teenagers to come to the lab and we scanned their brains while they performed a learning task. They were shown a picture of a butterfly and 2 flowers, and they were asked to guess which flower the butterfly would land on.
After each guess, they were given feedback. When the teens got it right, their striatum would get really active.
They would learn over time that the butterfly preferred one flower over the other. And everybody learned this task. But what we found is that the adolescents learned it more quickly than adults and with greater accuracy.
So having this reward center that's hyper-responsive to feedback actually helps teenagers learn from their environment. But this same region of the brain is also connected to risk-taking. Data from Adriana's lab suggests that teens with a more reactive striatum are more likely to engage in risky behavior and to enjoy it.
Rather than ask how you keep your teenager from taking risks, because we know the brain is really oriented towards risk during this time, it's better to ask, how do I provide opportunities for healthy risk?
Like trying out for the school play, even if you've never acted before, or asking someone out on a date. Those are real risks to a teenager, but they're not the kind of risk that parents typically worry about.
It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective that there's a time in life when teenagers want to become more independent, seek out new opportunities. In the animal world, this would translate into looking for new food resources or foraging behavior. And in teenagers, it often manifests as risk-taking behavior and simply moving away from the family unit.
Teenagers are going to make mistakes, but they've got this brain that's encouraging them to learn and explore and push boundaries.
So adolescence is a really special time, and I think we don't appreciate enough their energy and their ability to lead and to motivate, and how excitable they find life in a way that we maybe we don't later in life.
Our brains keep changing throughout our lives, and
Okay.
researchers at
So we'll stop that there. And now we know that teen brains are incredibly motivated by rewards. You may have noticed this at home with your young people who perhaps are not too keen on taking part in any household chores without knowing what's in it for them. But they're also out of sync in that emotion center of the adolescent brain is developing faster than the thinking bit of the brain. So we might then be able to understand that our adolescents are a bit more driven by their impulses and emotions at this stage of life than when they're fully formed adults. And there's that more rational part of thinking comes into play a bit more easily and a bit more quickly around decision making and responses. So take 5 minutes again and just have a wee think, like, what kinds of things light up your teen's limbic brain? What is it that gets them interested, excited? What will they happily put in effort for? And has lockdown got in the way of any of these activities for your young person? Has your young person kept doing any of these activities or increased the amount of time they spend on these activities? Whether that's perhaps going out in groups with their friends, is it spending more time on devices, online gaming? Has this created any tensions at home, perhaps? So far, we've seen why teens may be particularly vulnerable to the negative effects of lockdown, just through that negative impact on, I suppose, it's accessing activities that would otherwise help them explore those developmentally important interests and their connections with others. And their brains are driven to seek rewarding stimuli, and opportunities to do this in safe and developmentally typical ways have been hindered. They have been stopped throughout the cancellation of a lot of the other extracurricular activities that would have met that need, and through being able to meet up in their peer groups and do some of the things that we maybe all remember doing as teenagers and didn't necessarily need our mum and dad to know about. So, have you noticed that your teen is perhaps more anxious, irritable, sad? Do you notice that they're having extreme highs and extreme lows and they perhaps seem to flick very quickly? Maybe your teen's actually doing okay sometimes, or maybe you feel they're doing okay all the time, but you wonder if there's other bits and pieces going on under the surface for them. Do you find that you and your teen, you don't always know why or where these feelings are coming from or why they're so big? And I would just want to encourage you to hold in mind that, due to the overdeveloped emotion center in your teen's brain, this is totally normal. But then we added the COVID-19 situation and the huge impacts that has had on all aspects of daily living. And And again, we can see that actually this is a perhaps even more normal response to what is such an abnormal situation for us all. And we're going to have a look at another wee video to help us understand this even further in terms of brain activity.
The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions interact, the more control you can have over your thoughts and emotions. It's your brain. It's time for you to start controlling your own thoughts and emotions. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings interact. We're going to break it down using a visual, the hand model. We're going to use our hand for this. Your thumb, folding it in, is the middle of your brain, your amygdala. Your fingertips, folding it around, is your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain. We'll come back to this in a second. Our amygdala is really important in serious situations. For example, if you see a fire, it alerts you into action. It cuts off access to your prefrontal cortex where you think and reason, which is great. You don't need to calculate just how long it will take for the house to burn down. You just need to move. Back to your hand. Your amygdala in the center, with the fingers curled around, flips the prefrontal cortex lid. Flip the lid. Try it with me. Put your thumb in the middle, hold your fingertips, and force your fingertips over with your thumb, the amygdala. This could save your life in the fire situation. So we need our amygdala, but here's the problem. Your amygdala makes mountains out of molehills. So when there isn't a fire, and just say a pop quiz, your amygdala may react the same and flip your lid when there's no need to. When your lid is flipped, that's when your thoughts and emotions become muddled. When this happens, it means your thoughts are driven by your amygdala, and they are often distorted. This can fuel your worry or anxiety. So your lid is still flipped, and you need your prefrontal cortex to perform well on that pop quiz. So you have to find a way to get the prefrontal cortex to come down so you can think and reason.
Okay, so that's what we're going to have a wee think about shortly. But if you think about that amygdala being in the limbic system in the brain, and the fact that that part of the adolescent brain is developing slightly faster, out of sync with the thinking bit of the brain, teenagers kind of have that just as a great big red button that's much more sensitive to going off in this period of life. Okay, that might be why you experience more meltdowns at home or explosive arguments with your adolescent. They might have less patience with the people that they typically spend time with. And we can maybe just think, well, how can we support teens to keep their lid on in the first place through doing activities to provide an outlet to some of those big feelings and emotions that they're experiencing, to support them to connect and follow their interests during lockdown, or to bring the thinking bit of the brain back online after they flip their lid. And small things can make a really big difference just to soothe the emotional brain. Stopping and taking a breath or 10 can be really helpful. And earlier on the video series, Annabelle and Karen talk through how to do that controlled breathing in a helpful way. Name it to tame it, again, is a really helpful way to bring the thinking brain back online when we're driven by emotion. If we label it, then we're just accessing that bit of the thinking brain. And you can support that as a parent by saying, you know, I can see you're really feeling angry right now, and I understand that seems unfair. That sounds like worry talking. I'm here for you. Or you can support your adolescent to find the words themselves. You know, tell me how you're feeling just now. I want to understand. When somebody is on their way to flipping their lid, or once they flip their lid, that's really not the time to add the buts onto the end of these naming it to tame it phrases. Okay, I can see you're feeling really angry and I understand that it seems really unfair, but that's the way it is and everybody's finding it really hard just now. I would save the but part of the conversation for later on in the day or the evening, once that thinking part of the brain is fully back online and everyone can have a calm and collected thinking conversation about it. Encourage your adolescent to exercise if you can, to get out of the house. We know that when the lid is flipped, there's often quite a big release of adrenaline, so of energy, and doing things like going out for a walk after dinner, going for a run, doing a bit of yoga, getting on the trampoline, hitting the skate park, mountain biking, bash the drums. All of these things can just be a nice release for some of that pent-up energy. You can support your adolescent to practice a bit of a grounding exercise, at times when they are feeling calm and chilled out. And this then can be something they can access if they feel like they have flipped their lid and they're trying to calm and finding that challenging. Or if they're able to notice when they're on their way to flipping their lid. Again, a grounding exercise can be a nice way to bring things back into that thinking bit of the brain. So you're asking them to name 5 things that they can see, 4 things that they can feel, maybe 3 things that they can smell, 2 things they can hear, and 1 thing that they're thankful for. The COVID survival packs on the NHS Grampian website have got lots of other ideas and tips that may be worth checking out, and they can be found, as I say, on the CAMS website or on the Psychology Resilience website within NHS Grampian as well. What else can bring the thinking brain back online? Well, I suppose it can be helpful for you to reflect on why your teen is acting or reacting in these ways. Are there things that you just know are going to push that big red button, that emotion center of their brain? Is their reaction due to that flipping of the lid? Is it that perhaps their reaction was in some way justified, even if it seemed to be extreme to the context of what was going on? And I suppose in terms of supporting your adolescent to bring the thinking brain back online after they flip their lid, it might be helpful for them to understand this process. Maybe you can help them to understand this experience and those emotional ups and downs by going, through some of the videos in this presentation with them. It's sometimes also really interesting to think, well, what does my teenager do that flips my lid? Because, we all have those moments where emotions get the better of us. And sometimes as parents, it's helpful if we can easily identify what we can do to help us keep our lid on, or what we can do to bring the thinking part of our brain back online once we've been upset or had those big feelings ourselves. Okay. So all of that information that we just had a wee look at, how does it help us make sense of teen struggles during lockdown? It certainly won't cover everything for all young people and all of the difficulties that they're experiencing just now, but I think it can just provide a wee bit of context as to why lockdown might be affecting teen brain process just by making things that already feel difficult, reaching out to friends, having to sort of learn to navigate independent communication with each other, getting out and about, learning life skills, that stuff's being disrupted and is more difficult just now because of the pandemic. You can, again, just spend a bit of time reflecting how this has affected your teen and your teen's life. Do you think life is actually just a bit more challenging for them just now? I think particularly that lack of school structure, we're hearing a lot that is a particular challenge for lots of young folk. If you find that nothing motivating or rewarding or interesting is available to your young person during lockdown, you might sort of get a sense that there's a bit of helplessness creeping into your young person. They're finding it harder to get out of bed in the mornings because of that motivation. They're sleeping in later, they're trying to cram their schoolwork into shorter school hours and then becoming stressed because the workload is feeling very big. And whilst concerning, we can understand this as a normal response to what is a really abnormal situation. You may find it's difficult to engage your teen to try anything to feel better. And so taking approaches like building in incentives, so once we've gone for a walk after dinner, then you can have, a bit of time on your devices, for example. Making opting out not an option. So, we've decided it's a new family rule. This is just what we're doing. We're all going out at the weekend together. And once we've done that, you can do what you want, but we are all going to follow this family rule about spending a bit of time in the fresh air. You might want to try reaching out to them to arrange meeting up with a friend on their behalf. Maybe you know the family, maybe it's about adults getting together and saying, well, maybe our young people could get together at this time out of doors in line with COVID guidelines, just to have a bit of face-to-face connection. Or maybe, where things are at is that all you can do is let them know that you're trying to understand and you're there for them. And that in itself might just feel, a bit soothing and containing for your young person. We can think about supporting teens to connect and explore with people and things of interest, however possible, conforming to the COVID guidelines. But sometimes it's hard to generate those ideas and know what the right thing is to do. It can be helpful maybe to sit with your teen and just think about, well, what do they value? Is it about spending time with other people, doing well with their schoolwork and getting that feedback from teachers? Do they value being creative, caring for others, time with their pets, creating online content or connecting with people online? Are they people that like to use their bodies and do physically demanding things, or do they go after that adrenaline rush? It may help just to make a list of those, jot them down, and fill it out with some of the bits and pieces that can be managed around COVID guidelines. And then just thinking, well, how can we build this in a little bit every day just to provide improve that sense of connection and exploring those special interests, that specialized brain, and shooting just for even 5-10 minutes a day to start with. The NHS Grampian Early Intervention Teen COVID Coping Resource will have a few more ideas as well to consider. And I think just trusting that you likely know best what approach to take for your teen. If you can catch them in a good moment, you might want to ask them, because they will also know best as to what they will respond to and what they won't. Do you want to agree with them when they are in that thinking bit of their brain? That it's okay for you to sort of bug them and push them a little bit to actually get out for a walk, rather than taking no as the first answer. Do they want you to support them to message one of their friends or the parent of one of their friends on their behalf to get something sorted, just to get that meeting up started again? There are a wide range of free resources available, and I think we'll all recognise that for parents it can be difficult to know what are the good ones to go to, what are the appropriate ones to go to that aren't going to lead people down unhelpful rabbit holes. And the CAMHS resources website there has got a fantastic selection of bits and pieces around understanding and supporting mental health in various formats, handouts, web pages, links to apps. But it also doesn't just focus on low mood and anxiety, but it also covers managing during the COVID-19 pandemic and also general well-being. If you're feeling concerned about your teen's mental health and the impact of COVID, you or they can talk with someone about how they're feeling at the Grampian COVID-19 Psychological Resilience Hub, and that is a self-referral process online, which I will talk through in the resources presentation. There are lots more resources at the camsgrampian.org website. There is a lovely podcast there with various episodes from members of the Grampian CAMHS team. And I put a link there to the Solihull parenting resource as well, because that has got some lovely modules on understanding adolescent development, and there's one for teenagers as well to support their understanding of what's going on for them at this stage in their life too. The Solihull parenting stuff is very well regarded and is currently free if you put in the code TARTAN. And again, I show you how to do that in the resources presentation. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful for you, and I will wish you best of luck for exploring some of those resources and some of these topics with your young person when you have the chance. Thank you.